when you ask the question of what can law students do to expand their knowledge about the required practical skills that lawyers need in their practical or everyday life, at least in the United States, what I encourage law students to do is to take a hard look at what area of law do you want to practice? And if you can get a general idea of the type of law you want to practice, then you can start to look at firms or government firms that do that. And that's helpful because in my opinion, narrowing down your options is necessary. The law is large, but we can only, all of us, do a small percentage of what there is in the law. It's important for a lawyer or law student to get an idea of where they would like to practice geographically. I don't know how the Turkish legal system is, but in the United States, with the 50 different states, each state has their own bar association or licensing authority. And so I'm licensed in 2 states, Colorado and the state of Missouri. I couldn't practice in the state of Texas without getting admitted to that bar. In the same way with our federal courts, you have to get admitted into the federal bar to practice in those areas. So most of us will, I think it's probably everywhere, most of us will spend our careers within a pretty set geographic area. Maybe it's, 100-mile area, but we're not going to be traveling, at least I'm not, to New York or Washington, D.C. to represent clients. I'm going to be in the Denver, Colorado metropolitan area. And basically, if you put a dot on the map of where my office is, I'm going to be about anywhere from an hour around where my office is. So when a law student comes to me and asks me some questions about how can they get specific experience, I take them through a series of questions. What do you want to do? Where do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? And for instance, if somebody says, well, I would like to be a prosecutor, I would ask them, okay, well, where do you want to be a prosecutor? And if they told me, for instance, Kansas City, Missouri, which is a city in the state of Missouri, then I would ask them, well, why do you want to be there? And perhaps they give me a reason. I have family there, or it's an area of the country I grew up in. I would then look at all of the prosecutorial options they have in that area and encourage them to reach out to those individuals who are in those offices to try and get an internship, try and make networking connections for future job opportunities, but also in law school to make sure that they take the clinical class for prosecutors. Same way with criminal defense, make sure you take the clinical aspect of the practice. The other, at least for me, the other real problem with law school was, as we went through the normal courses you take, property, contracts, criminal law, procedure, the things that are really common for lawyers everywhere. We all deal with similar societal issues, right? How do you convey property, make sure the property stays in the family? Or how do we deal with a criminal problem? I've got a business. How do I make sure that this contract gets properly written and that we can make sure that everybody's rights are sufficiently taken care of in that business relationship? Well, we do a lot of talking in the United States in our legal system about those issues, but we don't do a really poor job of giving the students an idea of what it looks like to practice in those areas. And I think it's important for law students to try and get exposure to those various areas of law. If that means going to the courthouse and watching court proceedings, I would encourage that. If you think you are interested in contracts or like admiralty law, which is a really specialty area, you need to start finding lawyers who work in those areas, and at the very least, ask if you can just take a shadow them, look at what they do on a daily basis, or maybe just talk to them over coffee and try and figure out what they do. It's a real deficit, I think, or a problem that we have in our training, at least in the United States, which is, unlike medicine, which is a profession I often use as an example, medical students do rounds in different areas of medicine. And so You don't talk to your friends who are doctors and they have no idea what delivering a baby is like because they've all done it. Now, they may not be a master at delivering a baby, but they've at least done it 1 or 2 times. And if you think about that and compare how I was educated, I didn't ever draft a contract in law school. Nobody ever put down a deed for a piece of property and said, now, how would you convey this to this person's child? Nobody set a will down in front of me. And those are the things that are really missing. And I think there's good reason that medicine decided you need to give people exposure, because they realized nobody really knows what they want to do until they actually get their hands on what they're doing. And the idea of what you think you want to do is one thing. The reality is another. And I use as an example, I have a friend who's a very good doctor, and he is very smart. And he told me and all of our friends during his run up to medical school, I'm going to be a brain surgeon. And he certainly was smart enough to do that. And then I remember he became an infectious disease specialist. And I remember talking to him and asking him why. And he said, well, I did my rotation in surgery and I realized that it just wasn't for me. I couldn't do it. He gave me specific examples. Like, I was having trouble visualizing the brain and the spatial component necessary to do the surgery. I'm like, well, that's a big deal then. If you can't properly visualize it, that's a problem. And so I've seen people who will say, I really want to be a criminal defense attorney. I really want to do this, be in the courtroom. And yet they didn't do anything in law school to prepare them for it. They get into a public defender office, they go into court for their case, and they freeze because it's just not where they want to be. It's not what they want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would make a very poor contracts lawyer. It's not what I want to do. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. So I think those are the practical steps. Unfortunately, at least in the United States, but I suspect it's similar everywhere else, the necessary work to get that practical experience falls on the student. And if the student doesn't do it, they graduate from their legal training wondering, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it and where am I going to make those contacts? And that's why if you look at my LinkedIn posts, as I know you have, I talk a lot about how to try and network and what are some, I call it concrete steps to network, to get to meet people, to push yourself outside of your law school envelope or bubble, to meet the people who can help you expand your career and give you ideas on the type of law that you want to practice.